It's Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sepp. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on all your favorite podcast services, and you don't want to miss a thing. This week, I'm really excited to welcome back my friend and colleague, Rick Burt, CAE. He is going to be talking with us about a really interesting topic that we don't discuss enough, and that's recognizing performance. It's about contributions. It's about productivity, not longevity. Welcome to episode 215. Hey everybody, it's Monday, October 23rd, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I'm a CAE and a CNP, which is a certified nonprofit professional, if you haven't heard of that one before. I am so excited to welcome back Rick Burt, and we're going to be talking about recognizing performance this week. Now, last week, if you heard that wonderful episode with Jill Treby, we were talking about awards programs and how we recognize our members. This week, we're talking about how we recognize staff. How do we recognize that performance, reward it, elevate those people so that they can inspire others? But before we dive into that conversation, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. Thanks to everybody for joining us. So, Rick, you're back. Last time you were here, you were on with Jamie Notter. That was a great episode. But people may not have heard that episode. So could you say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Cecilia, for welcoming me back. I'm so excited to be with you today. So I'm Rick Burt, CAE, and I'm with the Association of Women's Health Obstetric and Neonatal Nurses, short A1. And there I serve as the VP of Membership and Volunteer Engagement. So I'm excited to be back with you and speak a little bit about this recognition for staff team members and how we certainly want to focus on rewarding that success often and ensure we elevate team members to show that great appreciation.
Yeah, and this conversation came out of another conversation that you and I were having about how sometimes organizations will recognize people simply for being there for a long time. And I had mentioned to you, I had worked at a couple of places. People got recognition at like annual meetings, got like these big trophies and things just for being there for 10 or 20 years. And it's not that these people weren't performers, but I see often people get recognized for having their butt in the seat for a long time, my opinion, not necessarily yours. And that's okay if the person's a performer, but I do think sometimes people look at longevity as equal to productivity. And I think we all know that's not necessarily the case. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, and part of this is I will agree with you in part that I've seen where organizations have rewarded individuals, individuals, just for longevity, just for showing up to the office, being there. Oftentimes, those individuals may be doing some random items, such as moving things around in the mailroom, for instance, or just visiting those as they visit offices with their coffee in the morning time or at lunch. And that's great. I think that's great for community, but is that really to the level of how we are recognizing performance? And that's the challenge that I see as okay, is this really what we should be doing here? Or is there something else involved with recognizing how someone is solving a problem, ensuring that the association, for instance, is moving its strategic priorities forward? And if that's not really happening, then we need to reevaluate as leaders how we are recognizing staff team performers.
Yes. And that's an excellent point. Although I chuckled a little bit when you mentioned the mail room because I don't know if anybody has those anymore. The email room, I guess. I love it.
You're right. I
Now,
was going to.
and that brings us to we don't appreciate it's not that we don't appreciate the people coming in and they do the things that need to be done over a long period of time, but is that really, like you said, moving us forward toward our strategic goals or objectives and our are we really having some success out of some of these activities? And I think if you've ever talked with me at all about like sunsetting programs, I always like to bring up the sacred zombie cow, right? And it's like we have a
Yes.
lot of those kind of things. And yeah, I'm going to say it. It's shocking, but I think sometimes we have staff who are sacred zombie cows. They've just been around for so long in whatever job they're doing. that nobody even thinks about them leaving or promoting them or finding out what else they might want to do because they've just been there for a long time. And I don't think that's fair to people necessarily. They've been there for a long time doing a certain job. Maybe they want to do something else, or maybe you should thank them for consistently showing up and doing their work. And I think, though, when we're looking at that, sometimes people are there for a long time and are they still plugged in? I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that just because somebody's there for a really long time that they're still plugged in to what the organization's trying to accomplish?
I will say, I think sometimes people are there, it's sort of like a widget factory. I'm going to put this round peg into this round hole,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I'm going to do so that I can get this paycheck at the pay period each time. And it's sort of deflating in my view for team members that may be trying to rise above that and really hone in on a new skill or looking to create an exciting program or product, but
Right.
that they may oftentimes have this team member who is just so miserable that this is all I'm going to do. And then even more so, you have those sacred cow team members that are then recognized just for showing up, and they may be able to use that level of tenure to get whatever they may want out of a senior team member. But that is seen, that is recognized by others, and typically the morale is what I've seen gets hit hard with a team trying to move a project forward when you have this other individual who may just be sitting there and is committed to not doing anything extra other than what is explicitly asked. And I truly think that is a disappointment now, particularly in this post-pandemic, not post-COVID, post-pandemic environment we're in, where many associations are working in hybrid environments, not necessarily in office 5 days a week.
Right.
And so that gets you to the point of being able to quickly assess whether or not if someone is actually uh, executing in a way that is going to be reflective positively within the association and the team.
Right. And and I'm so glad you brought that up because that really does impact morale of other people. And you cannot have a team if one person is only willing to do the bare minimum, especially if you
Absolutely.
have a high performing team, and I have seen that too. And then, ironically, they're the person who comes in and says, "How come I didn't get a promotion?" It's like, okay, let's talk about that. You show up, you do what we ask you to do, and you go home.
Yeah.
So that's why you're getting your annual review, and we bump you up a little bit every year. But no, you're not getting a promotion because you haven't really shown any interest in one. So
No, and you bring a valid point about, typically those are the types of team members that'll come in and ask that question. And as you mentioned that, I'm reminded of a book I read recently where, it described those type of team members in their BMWs. They're the ones that visit and we won't use the first define the first letter of the B, but it's that moaning and whining is
okay.
part of what they are doing. And so you want to then flip that script on that team member and ask them, so what does great look like to you in this environment? And
I
I
love
think that sometimes pivots that around.
hmm No, that's great. And I love that flipping that because that's something that I do. I actually call it the flip it model.
Oh,
If I'm trying to solve a problem and the way I'm coming at it isn't working, I flip it. I look at it from the other side. So that also works, when you're talking to people, like, well, what does that look like to you? Because to me, this is what it looks like. Let's flip it and see it from your perspective. Or how could you flip it and make it better for you? So, longevity does not necessarily equal recognition. And I think a lot of people, because And I think that's a holdover from the 20th century, that let's go to the office every day from 9 to 5, and in 20 years, we're going to retire and get a gold watch. And it's just for showing up for 20 years. And not everybody's ready to finish at 20 years, right? Some people are just getting started. So how do we recognize those people? And then bringing it back to recognizing the actual, the actual performers who are coming in and moving things forward, coming in with new ideas. We do the annual review, and sometimes there's a salary increase or a bonus or something like that. But what are some other ways, how can we think differently about recognizing performance of the high achievers, that the people who come in with the new ideas, who make the team better, who are giving their energy and helping their teammates move things forward?
I'm glad we're shifting to that, because I think that's so important that that recognition happens often.
Mhm.
It happens in public. You can also do it in private, but I think it means more when it's public. Whether that's, you're an exec and you're leading a team of 7, you do it within that team, or you broaden it out across the entire staff. If you're in a larger association, to where you want to elevate that team member publicly and specifically identify, hey, team member X just moved this across the line for us, and we were able to achieve X goal. And I just want to publicly, say thank you. We see you, and we want to make sure we continue to acknowledge you. Now, that I think is part of, having some vulnerability from the staff leader side to make sure that that's done publicly. But I also think sometimes in our associations, we have the opportunity, as you mentioned, there might be a bonus during the performance period. But I also think, if possible, and within your HR process, if there's an opportunity to give, some type of maybe a spot bonus throughout the year, or when that may happen. I know prior to our recording, we were talking a little bit about, certifications, and I think it's, some way to recognize someone for achieving a different level of professionalism. If you earn a certification, perhaps there's an opportunity there to recognize someone monetarily, in addition to calling them out and recognizing that effort publicly. I also think it's important to make sure we know those individuals. There are sometimes folks who get embarrassed about that, sort of fame. And
Oh,
so we
that's
want to
true.
make sure we recognize, okay, is this really going to work with Sally, for instance, or is she just going to be completely devastated if we do this? So I think also knowing your people is important.
Yeah, that is so true, because some people, they're shy, or maybe they're an introvert and they don't want to be in front of everybody. I mean, that's a really good point. And you reminded me of, years ago when I was and we were friends now, but it was somebody that used to be on my team that I managed at the Otolaryngology Association where we worked, and he loved The Simpsons. And so, I wanted to give him, just like some fun personal recognition. So I made him a Mr. Burns Award for performance and gave it to him. And he loved it. He's like, oh, this is awesome. And I don't know if he still has it, but he did keep it for a while. And so that's true, kind of having that fun with people. And another time when I was at the nursing home administrators group, I made some fun certificates for 2 of the team members, because they were kind of like Batman and Robin on a project. And so I gave them the like dynamic duo award, you know, kind of fun thing. Although I like Batman more than they did, I think. But the point was giving them that personal recognition. And another thing they did at nursing home administrators that I loved is at staff meetings, the team members, we started out with something called Kudos, and the team members would recognize each other for things that they had done or some help they had been given. And that was really important because it was completely virtual association. So that was a really great thing that I kept. That was like the one thing I kept on the staff agenda, was like, well, let's keep doing that. But yeah, that personal in the team recognition is so important. Now, the thing about the money, do you think, like, giving somebody a bonus for earning the CAE or another certification, do you think that's also a motivator for other people to, maybe up their professional development game?
I do believe it is a motivator, because that then shows that the organization, sees them and wants to reward that extra step, or going the extra mile. And then, that may not be something, I think it would be important for the association to make sure that that is known. It may be a certain amount that is already there, that's in it. Or, depending on the budget year, you might have, an influx of X amount of cash that can be devoted to that. I would leave that to the individuals administering it and how they make that determination. But I think it's important. Also, to your point, you were speaking about the kudos. I've worked in associations where that's happened. And I agree. I think that is a small gesture that goes a long way. And that allows the distribution of that recognition, not just by leaders. That means other individuals are empowered to identify that, a team member has helped them or moved something forward. And I think that's so important that you create that culture then around how do we recognize each other? It's not necessarily, and I imagine some organizations still do this, but I think there's some that I've seen have moved away from giving the certificates of, years of service each year, or making a big deal of about a long tenured employee, maybe at their annual convention. In part, a lot of times, I've seen those. I'm like, do the members really know who these people are? Or, they might have engaged with somebody virtually or something, but do they really know? And we're going to throw this huge party for this person and expend these funds. Or is it better if we were to do that within the staff piece and maybe invite the chief elected officer who would be involved more closely than all of the membership?
Yeah. That's really a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Because generally, well, the places I've worked where people were recognized for 10, 20 years of service, they were people who were performers. And so it didn't really bother me because not only were they high performers, they were committed long term to the organization. And in those situations, they were both well known among the membership.
Hmm.
Because they had kind of and now that I think about it, interestingly enough, they both worked on the magazine
Oh, so
at
okay.
two different groups. So it's like, oh, okay, that maybe that's got something to do with it. They're very articulate and they reach out to everyone. So and in those cases, it was kind of fun because a lot of people didn't know who they were. But that's a good point. Invite the chief elected officer or invite maybe some couple of the board members. I don't know to something.
I think because they're more than likely going to have been around enough to engage with staff members,
Mhm.
and all staff members, not just senior leaders, so they would recognize that. And I think that's important to find the right cadence of what
Mhm.
that looks like. you know so in addition to maybe that piece, I'm aware of associations I've worked at that give a monetary recognition annually once you've matched certain tenure, say 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So that's sort of just baked in.
Yeah.
But what else can we do that will show that appreciation for team members going above and beyond? Think about, if you have, for instance, a customer service team, and you have a customer service, person who is really solved the challenge for a member, and that member sends over, a note, recognizing that. I think it's important to elevate that quickly and demonstrate, how thankful you are of that team member who's done that, and been able to solve that problem for them.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And you just made me realize over the years, many of the people that were on my teams would get nice notes from a member that they helped and maybe even get a little gift. And I would be like, yeah, totally keep the gift and everything. But what you need to do is photocopy that note and send it to me to put in your file for when we do your next review. But people are kind of hesitant, I think, to share that, oh, I got a nice note from someone because I think they think they're bragging or something. So I would just like to say to everybody who's listening, if you've gotten a nice note from someone that you've helped because of your job, let your supervisor know, or the person you report to, your team leader, whatever that person's title is, let them know, because that lets them know that you are out there doing the work and people notice and appreciate it. And whether it's an email or a handwritten card or whatever it is, and to people leading teams, I encourage you, let those people keep the gifts. There's some people, they say, no, you can't keep the gift. I think that's wrong. If they want to be generous and give a person a gift, let them have it, let them
Yeah.
keep it. So
I
that's,
echo that completely,
yeah.
and I love, as someone who leads a team, I love being able uh, to circle back to team members who receive notes. And sometimes I've received them on behalf of the team member from a member saying, X team member did this for me. and was able to solve this problem, was able to, make my dream become a reality or whatever that might be. And I think it's important that that then gets shared. Certainly, maybe in the staff kudos, but turn it back and come back at annual performance review time, because oftentimes, we forget what may happen, from the beginning of the performance review time to the end. And so it's important to keep that file folder around, maybe a happy file or something like that, that you can jog your memory when it comes time for that.
Yeah, is boy, and that lifts your spirits when you're feeling down too. Keeping
Yeah,
your own kudos file, and it's like when you're having a bad day, you can flip through it, or like your email folder. Oh, well, once I did something good.
exactly.
And it
Exactly.
just cheers you up. So as we come near the end of our conversation, I'm going to throw in a bit of a wrench, bit of a
Okay.
vexing situation, and get your input on it. Because I've seen it, I've had to deal with it just as an employee, but also, trying to manage the emotions and tensions around it. But when a new employee comes in and they're like gangbusters, they're coming in, they're doing things well, they're making things happen, they're getting lots of attention because they're new, they're bright and shiny, they're new. And I don't think that people realize the bad position that puts that new staff person in when they get that much attention over other people who've been there for a while. And it's tough. Like I've been that new person, and then I've been the team leader managing the other people being upset. Well, that person's new. I've been here. So first of all, have you ever had to deal with that? And second of all, if you did, how did you handle it, or did you learn any lessons from it?
Yeah, that's a great um that's a great question. And I'm reflecting quickly to think of kind of how I've navigated that, but you are correct on the attention that the new team member receives. And perhaps I've been that person at some point. And I think the way that I've tried to approach this, either individually, personally for myself, but also in a position of leadership, has always been to encourage the team member to take one-on-one meetings with either department leads, as well as others, to learn about their job function, so that they also learn that they get to know the other team member, and try to dispel any of that angst or that potential contrarian, uh, back and forth that might take place. So I think it's always good to start in that place of seeking to understand, because then the rest of it will come along. But I also like to empower the team members, and that is, have that time to ask those questions, because you're not going to know everything. And usually, I think you probably agree, and probably listeners as well, in a new job, it takes you at least a year sometimes to really get up to speed on the ebbs
Totally.
and flows and the cycles, so that you really then can put your finger on things quickly. And
Yeah.
so, I want to celebrate those new team members, but also recognize that they need to have some structure, because you don't want them to get too overwhelmed too quickly. And then you're also still figuring each other out in terms of how you're going to work, your working relationship is going to work.
Right. And that really makes people uncomfortable because then the rest of the staff kind of turns against them or something, and then it makes them not have a good experience. So,
Yes.
let's kind of balance that. And also, it always I often think of the story from the Bible about the prodigal son, and he takes all his money, tears off into the world, and ends up just like partying and blowing all his money, and then he comes crawling home asking to be taken back in. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I got to tell you, I've always sided with the brother who stayed home and was responsible. And I know Jesus was trying to teach a lesson about forgiveness, like we can all be forgiven. But when his brother complains, but hey, I've been here, I've been working, I've been doing this, I kind of feel for that character in the story, because we have to balance that. And I think, like so much in life, it's about that balancing act of integrating the new staff people with the people who've been there for a while, and how are you going to build that team and then recognize everybody's contributions, no matter how long they've been there. And also, as you mentioned, learning, a new person, they might come in and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm new, bright and shiny, here's a bunch of new energy. But it is going to take them at least 6 months to figure out what's really going on. And then a whole year, I agree with you, to really understand their job and the organization and what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives them time to build those relationships. And I think that's the most important thing I would say in any of this, whether that is recognizing team members and identifying the appropriate way to do that, is honing in and embracing the importance of relationships. Because we spend a lot of time with each other in the workspace, whether that's in virtual environment or just working on the same projects. We are spending a lot of time with a small cohort of individuals we have to work with.
Right. And well, and yes, and I love that. I thought you were going to say something else, so I'm kind of like, oh, so, but no, I love that because we do spend a lot of time with people we work with, and integrating a new person can be challenging sometimes. But I think if we remember to talk to the people who are there first and say, hey, we got this new person coming in, let's not just be welcoming, but let's remember that people are going to be like, oh, they're the new person, and so they're going to get a little bit more attention right at the beginning, but after they're here for 3 months, they're not new anymore. So
Yes.
we can
The,
keep
the
that in
shiny
mind too.
badge is
Yeah.
wearing off. And at that point, it's sort of, you can't really say I'm new here now.
That's right. And let's remember, we want to recognize and welcome the new team member, but we don't want to be too effusive and like how wonderful they are, because you really, people, yes, we're at work and we're trying to be professional, but people have feelings. Let's not hurt people's feelings in the process, of bringing in the new people. So, Rick, we've talked about a lot of different things in this conversation, and you've had a lot of great ideas about not just annual, I'm sorry, but year long, all throughout the year recognition, and not just little certificates, actually, maybe some cash money. So, what do you think about, giving people time off, additional time off, for recognition of their performance?
I absolutely think that that is important, particularly in our current environment where we are constantly connected, either through some type of, social media or some type of work environment, whether that's MS Teams or whatever that might be. I think it's important to take that time and be reflective. And that is something that I view now as low hanging fruit for associations
Mhm.
because of the connectivity that so many have now. It's the encouraging, please go off the grid and step away. So handing that out and then reminding team members to take that time is important. So yes, I absolutely support that.
Yeah, that's great. So, well, this has been a great conversation. I think we've touched on everything, even we came close to stepping on some landmines, but I think we avoided them
Yes, I think
pretty
so.
well. So, Rick, as you know, you've been on the show before. I like to ask my guest, what is the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And then if they wanted to talk to you more about your views on recognizing performance, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, well, I've had a wonderful time with you again, and I certainly love our conversation. I would say if there's one thing that I would encourage our listeners today to take away, and that would be make sure you identify the personal way team members will react to recognition. But I
Mm,
also think it's important to give that recognition often. Uh, don't wait a year when it's well out of time, well out of mind. Try to think about it in terms of smaller ways to do it, whether that is in kudos of an all staff meeting that might take place once a month or every other month, or individual team meetings. So it's important to do that and make sure it's personal, because that would be a way to really acknowledge those team members and the efforts they've put forward. And if you want to follow me or get in contact with me, I'd say the easiest way is LinkedIn. And so I'm easily to be searched there at Rick Burt, CAE. And I look forward to connecting with any and everyone that may have questions moving forward.
that's great. And I'm maybe going to embarrass you a little bit. Congratulations on being 40 under 40
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Association Forum. So Rick is one of the people that I look to lead our future in our profession, which I was sharing with him as we were prepping for this episode. I sometimes fear for the future. But then I talked to Rick and I feel better. So, Rick, thank you for joining me again. I look forward to having you back.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to coming back in the future.
Yay. Thank you. So, well, we have to go rogue for now, but don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more exciting episodes in our future. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization think outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. We have a services page. You can catch up on podcast episodes, all kind of good info there. If you are a nonprofit management professional seeking some education, we also have an education program. It is so big, it has its own website, the 501c League, the 501cleague.net. You can check out our course catalog and see how we're winding up the fall of 2023. So that's it for this week. On behalf of Rick and myself, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.